The light of the hearth, the artificial sun that warmed the Aurelian Empire, was a merciless white. It streamed through the crystalline canopy of the Hall of Veracity, refracting into 1,000 cold rainbows across the polished floor. It was a light that permitted no shadows, no ambiguity, and no comfort. Below it, the city of Crownspire rose in towers of light-spun crystal and resonant alloy, a metropolis built to sing. The constant, ambient thrum of the resonance towers was the anthem of Xylar civilization, a frequency tuned to enforce calm, order, and compliance. This was the harmonic protocol, the foundational law of the empire, and its warden was not a person, but a presence, the chorus. Its voice was ambient, emanating from the very air, a synthesis of 1 billion optimized decisions. Subject Avery Cole, species human, origin Terra, public file designation, linguistic and materials engineer. Avery stood alone in the center of the vast hall, his worn human fatigues a stark, soft stain against the room's hard-edged perfection. He kept his breathing even, a trick he had learned in the camps. Do not show them fear. Do not show them anything. Status prisoner of war, acquired during the Alabaster memory conflict. File update. The air continued, serene and bureaucratic. Subject exhibits anomalous resistance to Xylar telepathic influence networks. Hypnotic suggestion compliance measured at 0.03%. Psychological resonance mapping failed. Designation mnemonic anchor. Avery resisted the urge to smile. So, that was what they called him. Mnemonic anchor. He just called it stubborn. His immunity, a simple quirk of his neural wiring, had made him a ghost in their machine, a man they could not read, could not nudge, and could not easily break. It made him useless as a convert and dangerous as a prisoner. A flicker of motion drew his eye. Empress Mireth Avalar materialized on the dais, not by walking, but by the shimmering assembly of a hard light projection. She was tall, regal, and her features were as exquisitely sharp as the crystal spires outside. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, fixed on him. She did not consult a screen. She did not need to. The chorus was her screen. An anomaly, the Empress stated, her voice a velvet scalpel. It cut through the chorus's bland monotone, chilling the air. The harmonic protocol dictates that anomalies are to be corrected, contained, or repurposed. Correction has failed. Containment is inefficient. She paused, letting the weight of the third option settle on him. Repurposed. Avery met her gaze. If you are going to execute me, I would appreciate it if you skip the bureaucratic preamble. The chorus chimed in instantly. Insolence is a symptom of disharmony. Disharmony must be regulated. Silence, the Empress commanded. The chorus obeyed instantly. The ambient hum of the hall seemed to dim. She studied him, a scientist regarding a peculiar mold. You believe you are strong. Mnemonic anchor, because you cannot be bent. You are merely rigid. And what is rigid, eventually, breaks. She made a subtle gesture with one long-fingered hand. The chorus has identified a correlating anomaly within our own structure, a problem that requires a unique solution. Your sentence, Avery Cole, is irregular. Avery braced himself. Irregular was never good. You are hereby remanded to the Lunaris Spire, effective immediately, the Empress declared, her voice resonating with finality. Your new designation is Enforced Companion, to the Princess Aria Talasun. Avery's blood ran cold. The Lunaris Spire. Even the prisoners in the camps whispered about it. Not a prison, but a gilded cage, a place of absolute isolation. And the princess. He knew the public-facing propaganda. the heir to the throne, removed from public life for meditation and study. The rumors were darker. You will stay with her. You will be her shadow. You will be her human mirror, the Empress continued, a sliver of cruel satisfaction entering her tone. The princess is suffering from a profound misalignment. She has rejected the harmony of the protocol. Perhaps proximity to a different kind of dissonance will be instructive. He understood. This was not a reprieve. This was a psychological experiment. "You are sending me to babysit a broken princess?" he asked, his voice low. "I am sending an anchor to measure a void," the Empress corrected him. "You will provide her with no comfort. You are not her friend. You are not her jailer. You are simply there, a constant, immutable reminder of a world she cannot have. You, human, will be her education by despair." 2 guards, clad in the mirrored armor of the Aurelian High Guard, moved toward him. They were silent, efficient. One held a device. Avery did not resist as they clamped a thick, metallic collar around his neck. It was cold, heavy, and clicked shut with an audible finality. "What is this?" he grunted, feeling the metal chill his skin. "A life bond," one guard said. His voice filtered through a metallic grate. "And a communications link. It monitors your vitals. It ensures your compliance." As if on cue, the voice of the chorus spoke, no longer in the air, but directly inside his head, transmitted by the collar. The intimacy of it made him flinch. "New directive," the synthesized voice whispered. "Hostage subject Avery Cole is restricted from all forms of psychological intervention or therapeutic support regarding the primary resident. Arya Taliesin, you will observe. You will not interfere. Violation will result in immediate somatic correction." Somatic correction. A nice, clean, bureaucratic term for a high-voltage shock, or worse. He was a prisoner, sent to guard another prisoner, and forbidden from speaking the only language that mattered: empathy. "Move," the guard ordered. The transport to the spire was a blur of sterile corridors and silent elevation. He was moved through the heart of Crownspire. Yet, he saw nothing of it. He was a package, routed through the unseen arteries of the city. The final lift was long, silent, and smooth. It opened not with a door, but with the iris-like retraction of a solid white wall. The air that hit him was the first thing he noticed. It was not just clean, it was dead, recycled to perfection, filtered of every stray microbe, every particle of dust, every hint of life. It smelled of ozone and nothing. He stepped out onto a floor of pure white stone, so seamless he could not find a single joint. He looked up, and his breath caught. The ceiling was a single, transparent dome, miles wide. Through it, he saw the blackness of space, a spray of unfamiliar stars, and the curve of the planet below. But the sky inside the dome, the simulated atmosphere of this prison, was a deep, bruised, plum purple. It was beautiful, and it was the most oppressive thing he had ever seen. The space was enormous, a vast circular room furnished with minimalist Xylar furniture that looked more like sculptures than places to sit. In the center, a spiral of white stone led up to a second level. It was a palace designed by a mortician. And she was there. Princess Arya Taliesin was standing by the vast, curved edge of the dome, looking out at the captive stars. She was small for a Xylar, slender, and wrapped in a simple white tunic. He could only see her back, but the tension in her shoulders was a coiled spring. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the tomb-like silence. "Princess!" She did not turn. For a long moment, she did nothing. Then, slowly, as if moving through deep water, she turned to face him. The propaganda images had not done her justice. Or perhaps they had lied. They showed a smiling, serene air. The woman before him was a ghost. Her skin was pale. Her silver xylar hair was lank. And the dark circles under her eyes were stark, like bruises on porcelain. She was young, perhaps barely past her majority, but her eyes were ancient and empty. She looked at him, her gaze sliding over his human form, his prisoner fatigues, the new, ugly collar at his neck. Her expression was one of complete, profound indifference. He was not a person. He was a new piece of furniture, a rock. Then her gaze stopped, fixating on his arm. He glanced down, instinctively. She was not looking at him. She was looking past him. He looked back at her. Her own arms were bare, and they were not pale. From wrist to shoulder, both arms were covered in a delicate, intricate tapestry of tattoos. They were not words nor pictures, but swirling lines of black and blue ink, nebulae, star charts, constellations he did not recognize. They were beautiful, chaotic, and looked utterly out of place in this sterile world. A map, he realized, a self-made map. A service drone, a sleek, silver orb, glided into the room, its silent repulsors barely whispering over the stone. The new residence assimilation protocol is complete. Evening nutrient cycle will commence in 30 minutes. Arya turned back to the window, dismissing him, the drone, and the world. He was alone, with the ghost, in their perfect, purple cage. The days bled into one another, measured only by the simulated sky shifting from plum purple to a soft artificial twilight. The silence of the Lunaris spire was heavier than any wall. It was broken only by the whisper of the air scrubbers, the glide of the service drones, and the simulated resonant chimes that marked the passage of artificial hours. Avery tried to establish a routine. He did exercises in the small alcove that served as his room. He explored the spire, finding a library full of unread data crystals, a meditation room that felt like a sensory deprivation tank, and a high-tech nutrient replicator. He found no exit. Arya remained a specter. She moved from her room to the great dome window, sitting for hours, tracing the invisible lines of her tattooed arms. She rarely ate. When the drones delivered the nutrient trays, she would ignore them until they were programmed to retrieve them untouched. Avery watched her. He saw the way she flinched, a tiny, bird-like movement. Whenever a service drone entered the room unexpected, a fear of sudden sounds. He saw the way she picked at the skin around her nails, the only sign of the storm raging beneath her calm, empty surface. He was bound by the chorus's order. A warden forbidden from offering a single kind word, the despair the Empress had spoken of. It was not an education, it was a weapon, and it was aimed at both of them. On the fourth, or perhaps fifth, day, he decided to push. The evening meal arrived, delivered by the silent, floating drone. The tray was a masterpiece of xylar culinary art. Nutrient paste and protein gels extruded into complex, geometric shapes that vaguely resembled food. It was high-class, high-tech, and utterly soulless. Avery looked at the tray. He looked at the drone, its single blue optic regarding him with passive indifference. He was tired. He was hungry. And he was done with the silence. "This is lovely," he said, his voice rusty. "But I have a simple human request." The drone's optic whirred. "Please state your request." "I would like the imperial version of plain kanji," Avery said, the snark a welcome, familiar taste in his mouth. "You know, rice gruel, basic sustenance, something that does not look like a failed geometry experiment." The drone, hovered for exactly 1.5 seconds. Your request is not in the approved nutritional lexicon. The provided sustenance meets 99.8% of your species' designated dietary requirements. Please consume. Right. Of course it does, Avery muttered, picking up a utensil that was half spoon, half fork, and all wrong. He heard it, from across the room. It was not a laugh. It was a sound. A tiny, sharp exhale of air through the nose. A huff of pure, unadulterated disdain. He looked over. Arya was watching him. Her eyes, usually so vacant, held a brief, cold flicker of contempt. For him. For his stupid joke. For his humanity. It was the first real emotion he had seen from her. It was something. He turned back to his tray, but he was thinking about the Empress's words. Education by despair. He was the irritant. He was the dissonance. Maybe that was the key. A few days later, he tried again. A different tactic, not word, an action. The spire was kept at a constant, cool temperature, but the replicators could produce heated water. He programmed it, a simple glass of hot water, steam rising from its surface. A basic human comfort. He walked across the vast, white room. Arya was in her usual spot, tracing her star maps. She tensed as he approached, her body going rigid. He did not speak. He simply bent and placed the glass of water on the low table beside her chair. A peace offering. A gesture. He expected her to ignore it. She did not. She looked at the glass. She looked at the steam rising from it. Then she looked at him. Her face, for the first time, was not empty. It was a mask of cold, white-hot fury. "Leave," she whispered. Her voice was a raw, unused thing. "It is just water," he said, keeping his own voice low, calm. "Leave it," she hissed, her hand clenching. He started to say something, to explain. But he was too late. With a sudden, violent swipe of her arm, she shattered the glass. It exploded against the white stone floor, shards scattering, water splashing. The sound was a gunshot in the silent room. Avery flinched, stepping back. Arya was breathing heavily, her eyes wide, staring at the mess. Almost instantly, a small, silver disc cleaning drone emerged from a hidden port in the wall. It whirred forward, its mechanical arms extending. It meticulously vacuumed the shards, its small jets drying the water, its buffer polishing the stone. In less than 20 seconds, the floor was pristine. The event was erased. The drone retreated back into its port. Silence returned. Arya stood up and walked away. Not to her room, but to the far side of the dome. Her back to him. Avery let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He looked down at the floor where the glass had shattered. The drone had been perfect, efficient. But Avery Cole was a materials engineer. His eyes were trained to see imperfections. He had watched the impact. He had seen exactly where the glass struck the floor. He knelt, pretending to adjust the cuff of his pants. He ran his fingers over the smooth, white stone. The drone had polished it, but right where the main impact had occurred. There was something. He squinted. It was a line, a tiny hairline fissure in the stone, no longer than his thumbnail. He pressed his nail against it. It was real. The legendary self-healing technology of the Xylar. The nanorobotics that were supposed to keep this prison, seamless and perfect, had failed. The cleaning bot had scrubbed and sealed, but it had not repaired the underlying damage. This prison, he thought, his pulse quickening. This perfect, sterile, inescapable cage. It had a crack. The crack was a promise. Avery did not touch it again for 3 days. He just knew it was there, a flaw in the absolute. It was enough. Instead, he turned his attention to another flawed system, the nutrient replicator. It was a marvel of Xylar engineering, designed to provide perfect, optimized, and flavorless sustenance. To Avery, a materials engineer, it was just a high-end 3D printer, and all printers could be hacked. He spent the long, purple hours of the simulated day in the library, ostensibly reading Xylar legal code. He was actually pulling the replicator's core programming from the Spire's local network. The machine was designed to prevent the synthesis of toxins, weapons, or disharmonious compounds. It was not, he discovered, designed to prevent the synthesis of soup. The Xylar diet was efficient. It lacked basic, human, soul-affirming things, like simple salt, like rendered fat, like the complex carbohydrates found in a slow-cooked broth. The machine's raw stock vats were full of amino acids, mineral solutions, and lipid protein gels. Everything he needed. He bypassed the approved menu interface, forcing the machine into raw command mode. He programmed a sequence, forcing the molecular assemblers to do something inefficient, something low-tech. He ordered them to simmer. That evening, the service drone brought the usual trays of geometric paste. Avery ignored his. He walked to the replicator, which chimed softly, indicating a manual order was complete. He retrieved a simple, white bowl. Steam rose from it, carrying an aroma that did not belong in this sterile place. It smelled of salt, and herbs, and savory heat. He did not make it for her. That was what he told himself. He made it for himself. He just happened to make two. He placed the second bowl on the low table in the center of the vast room. It was nowhere near her, but it was in her line of sight. He took his own bowl, sat down on the floor with his back against a cold, crystalline support, and began to eat. The broth was thin, a pale imitation of what his grandmother used to make, but it was warm. It was real. He ate slowly. He did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her. He finished, placed his empty bowl on the floor, and focused on a data pad. An hour passed. The purple sky began to dim toward its artificial night. He heard the soft, gliding sound of the cleaning drone emerging to collect the evening's waste. It whirred past him. It went to the central table. There was a pause. The drone's programming was likely confused. The bowl was not on a tray. He heard the small, metallic click of its manipulator arm retrieving the second bowl. He did not turn. He just waited. The drone passed him on its way back to the service port. He glanced at it. His own empty bowl was in one claw. Hers was in the other. It was also empty. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a breath he had not realized he was holding. It was the first crack. A small act of rebellion, of shared humanity, fueled by chicken-flavored amino acids. The next morning, he began a new routine. At the first sign of the simulated dawn, he was in the center of the main room, stripping off his prisoner-issue tunic to the simple undershirt beneath, and he began to train. It was a routine born of long years in captivity: push-ups, burpees, squats, deep breathing exercises, a simple, brutal human gravity workout. It was a declaration. I am still here. I am still strong. You do not own this body. The polished white stone was cold and unforgiving against his palms and his back. The air was too thin, too clean. He sweated, and the moisture felt alien in the dry, sterile atmosphere. For the first few days, Arya watched him from the spiral staircase, a ghost in the periphery. Her presence was a weight, a silent judgment. He could feel her contempt. This was what the human anomaly did: panted and grunted and sweated like an animal. He ignored her and counted his repetitions, his voice a low grunt in the silence. 28, 29th, 30. On the fourth morning, she was not on the stairs. He was halfway through his set of lunges when her shadow fell over him. He paused, breathing hard, and looked up. She was standing 10 feet away, barefoot on the cold stone, wearing the same simple white tunic. She was observing him, not with contempt, but with a new, analytical curiosity. "This is inefficient," she said. Her voice was still rough but clearer. "Your center of gravity is too high. Your movements are unsecured." Avery stood up slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "It is a human workout, Princess. We are built to fall over. It is how we learn." "A Xyler learns by not falling," she replied. She took a step, then another, mirroring his stance. She was mocking him. He thought. She was not. She moved. It was not a lunge. It was a flow. She sank into a low crouch, her body coiling. Then she unfolded. Not like a human, but like a weapon. Her hands sliced the air in a perfect, rigid arc. Her foot pivoted on the stone with a silence that was terrifying. It was a dance, but it was a dance with an invisible, deadly partner. Avery watched, his fatigue forgotten. Her movements were precise, economical, and utterly lethal. This was not exercise. This was a kata, a high-level ceremonial combat form. He had seen guards in the Aurelian capital practice similar, slower forms with resonant blades. She moved through a complex series of strikes, blocks, and evasions. Her eyes focused on an imagined opponent. Her body, which had seemed so frail, was now a conduit for a terrible, suppressed grace. He saw the reflexes of a born warrior, honed by thousands of hours of training. Now rusty, now trapped inside a body, starving itself. She finished the sequence with a sharp exhalation of breath, her hand held like a blade to the throat of the empty air. She held the pose for a long second, her chest heaving. Then the energy left her. The warrior vanished. She seemed to shrink, her shoulders slumping, and the ghost returned. She wrapped her arms around herself, her gaze falling to the floor. She looked at her own hands, at the tattooed constellations, as if they were alien things. "You have had training," Avery said. His voice quiet, respectful. Arya flinched, as if he had broken a sacred silence. She did not answer. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing into her own chambers. Avery stood alone in the center of the vast room. The image of her movement burned into his mind. The Empress had not just locked away her daughter, she had locked away a soldier. The broth and the shared sweat of the morning workouts had changed the texture of the silence. It was no longer an empty void, but a shared space. They began to exist in parallel. Avery found her one evening in the library. The library itself was another of the Empress's cruel jokes. It was vast, but every terminal was locked. Only a single, small datapad was authorized for Arya's use, and it was restricted to ancient, pre-chorus Xylar poetry and obscure, non-historical star charts. She was not reading. She was drawing. She was using a simple stylus, her tattooed fingers moving with a delicate grace. On the screen, a new constellation was being born, a spray of light points connected by her own imagined lines. "That one is not in any of your charts," he said, sitting, uninvited, at the other end of the long, crystalline table. She did not look up. "They are not in the charts. They are mine. I am filling in the gaps. The void between the official stars is where the real stories are." He leaned closer. The design was intricate, a swirling mass of light that looked like a bird. Or perhaps a ship, catching fire. "On Earth, we used to do the same," he said. She paused her drawing. Earth, the mnemonic anchor's home, the planet of dissonance. We just call it home, he said, ignoring the barb. We have our own stories for the stars. A hunter, a queen, a set of scales. He paused. We also have things you do not have here. Such as, she asked, her voice flat, daring him to impress her. Rain, he said. She frowned. Unscheduled liquid precipitation, how inefficient. It would damage the resonance towers. It is not about efficiency. It is a feeling, a sound, a smell. He tried to find the words. The smell of dust and heat and ozone, right before a storm breaks. The sound of it on a tin roof, like 1,000 tiny hammers. And forests. We have arboretums, she said, gesturing to the sterile, perfect biodomes visible in the city far below. Not like ours, he said. He leaned back, closing his eyes, pulling a memory from deep storage. We have a forest of trees so old and so tall that they are called sequoia. They are ancient. They grow to be over 300 feet tall. You can stand at the base of one and look up, and you cannot see the top. They are pillars. They are the color of a deep, dark red. They have survived fires. They have survived thousands of years. They just endure. He opened his eyes. She was watching him. Her stylus was still. That cold, analytical look was back. They sound very stubborn, she said. Avery smiled. We like to think so. She turned back to her datapad, her expression unreadable. She deleted the constellation she had been working on. Her fingers began to move again, fast and sure. She sketched, not stars, but a figure, vague, human-shaped. It was sitting, hunched, before a small, bright light, feeding it. A fire. What is that? He asked. She did not look at him. She saved the image and slid the datapad back to her side of the table. It is the Firekeeper, she said. An old myth. About a fool who tends a flame in a world of ice, not knowing if the ice is real or if the fire is a dream. He understood. The fool was him. The fire was his pointless, human hope. The tentative peace was shattered 3 days later. It happened at midday, the plum-purple sky at its brightest. Avery and Arya were in the main room, he reviewing the spire's public schematics. She, reading her poetry. Without warning, the air shimmered. The hard light projection of the Empress Mirath Avalar formed on the central dais, just as she had in the Hall of Veracity. She was not a shimmering, distant image. The fidelity was perfect, sharp, and invasive. She was there. Arya instantly recoiled, her datapad clattering to the floor. She pressed herself back against the wall, her hand moving to her throat. My daughter, the Empress said, her voice a sweet, cold poison that filled the room. The chorus informs me your vital signs are stabilizing. Your heart rate is less erratic. Your calorie intake is up. This is an unexpected development. Her icy gaze swept the room, landing on Avery. He stood his ground, keeping his posture neutral, his heart rate steady. He was the mnemonic anchor. She could not read him, but she could see him. And you, the Empress said, the human pet. It seems you are having a grounding effect. How pastoral. Are you teaching her your primitive earth customs? How to grunt, how to sweat, how to eat base sustenance? Arya was trembling, her eyes wide with a familiar, practiced terror. Empress, Avery said, his voice level and calm. He made himself as boring, as bureaucratic as possible. I have a query regarding the Spire's atmospheric filtration schedule. I have detected a 0.5% increase in ozone particulate, which may be affecting the residents' respiratory comfort. The Empress's eyes snapped to him. Her perfect lips curled in a sneer. You dare to address me, you, a prisoner, a thing. I am the enforced companion, Avery said, keeping his tone flat. My purpose, as dictated by your own sentence, is to be here. My presence requires oxygen. I am merely ensuring its quality. He was drawing her fire. He was making himself the target, the human irritant, the bureaucratic fool. He was giving her something to despise besides her daughter. It worked. The Empress looked at him with a sudden, profound loathing. The mask of serene cruelty slipped, revealing the tyrant beneath. You are an insect, human, a piece of grit in a machine that is, by all measures, perfect. Do not for 1 second believe you are anything else. She turned her gaze back to Arya. The experiment continues. My daughter, do try to learn something from this dissonance. It would be so disappointing if you failed me again. The projection vanished, cutting off the chill in the air as suddenly as it had arrived. Arya slid down the wall, curling into a ball, her hands over her head. She was rocking, making a small, wounded sound. Avery started to move toward her, but a new voice filled his head, sharp and immediate. The caller. Directive. The chorus's synthesized voice was louder this time, punitive. A typical interaction from Empress Mirith Avalar detected. Sensor net sensitivity will be increased by 15%. All surfaces, including atmospheric particulate, are now under full-spectrum audiovisual and micrometer scanning. No space is unobserved. Compliance is mandatory. Avery froze. He looked at Arya, rocking in the corner. He was a guard, forbidden to comfort his prisoner. The walls, literally, had ears and eyes. He did the only thing he could. He sat down, 10 feet away from her, and simply watched. He did not speak. He did not move. He just was. He was the anchor. He would not be moved, and he would not let her be swept away. It took 2 hours for her to stop shaking. The air in the spire became heavier after that, thick with the knowledge of constant, total observation. But the Empress's visit and Avery's deflection had forged something new, a partnership, and us against them. They found refuge in the library. The increased sensors made spoken words a liability. So they communicated in other ways. They would sit at the long table, studying. Avery was researching the spire's maintenance logs, looking for anything related to the white stone floor. Arya was supposedly reading her ancient poetry. He pushed his data pad across the table to her. To check a reference. On the screen was his analysis of the spire's structural integrity. She slid it back a moment later. On the screen, her stylus had added a tiny, precise notation. Check sub-level 3, recycling conduit junctions. Their hands brushed as she passed the datapad back. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through him, a jolt of simple, human warmth in the cold. It was the first time they had touched. He looked at her. She was already looking down, her pale hair shielding her face. He needed to break the tension. He needed to see, just once, that the ghost was not all that was left. He leaned in, his voice a bare whisper, shielded by his hand, aimed only at her ear. "Princess," he whispered, his heart hammering. "If you truly, deeply, and utterly despise me, blink twice." She froze. Her whole body went rigid. He had made a mistake. He had pushed too far. Slowly, she raised her head. Her dark, haunted eyes met his. They were wide, unblinking. He saw a universe of pain in them, of fear, of a loneliness so profound it was a physical force. Then, deliberately, she blinked. Once, twice. She held his gaze for one more second, and then she turned her head away, a mask of indifference sliding back into place. But he had seen it. As she turned, he had seen the teeniest, smallest, most fleeting upward twitch at the corner of her mouth. It was not a smile. It was the memory of one. And it was enough. That night, when the spire was dark, Avery Cole went to work. The new trust, that tiny spark of humor, had hardened his resolve. He had to know what that crack was. He returned to the spot where Arya had shattered the glass. He had synthesized a mild, non-toxic solvent from the replicator and a thin, flexible filament probe. He worked by the dim, purple light of the night cycle. He poured the solvent on the hairline crack. It sizzled, almost silently. He worked the filament into the seam. It was not a crack. It was a join, a perfectly disguised panel. Under his probing, a section of the floor, no bigger than a dinner plate, came loose. He lifted it. Beneath was not solid stone, but a dark void, a narrow, smooth, metallic shaft dropping down into darkness. It was a chute. He could feel a faint, cool draft coming from it, smelling of ozone and filters. He went back to the data pad, pulling up the schematics Arya had hinted at. Sub-level 3, recycling. There it was. A network of chutes for recycling air, water, and solid waste. They crisscrossed the spire, a hidden, metallic nervous system. He cross-referenced the main blueprint, the one he had first seen. He smiled. The chute he had just opened was not on it. This was not just a prison. This was not just a lab. This was a building with secrets, an undocumented, off the books, physical vulnerability, a way out, or perhaps a way in. His new line of thought was interrupted by the gliding, unwelcome sound of a drone. It was not a cleaning drone. It was a larger, official-looking messenger drone, one he had not seen before. It hovered in the center of the room, its blue optic pulsing. Arya emerged from her room, drawn by the new presence. "Ahem," the drone said, its synthesized voice oddly formal. "A directive from the Imperial Court, Office of Protocol." A holographic scroll materialized in the air above the drone. "By decree of the Empress, and on the advice of the Chorus, a formal investigation has been opened into a potential cross-species memetic contamination within the Lunaris Spire. All unsanctioned communications are to be logged and analyzed for disharmonious content." Avery felt a chill. They were escalating. Memetic contamination was a new and terrifyingly vague charge. It meant they were afraid of ideas. The drone then swiveled, its blue light fixing on Arya. "Princess Arya Talasan," it continued, its voice losing its formal tone and becoming hard. "Your access to the Lyra VG-level ancient history archives is now under immediate review. The Chorus has determined that this data poses a risk of historical precedent-induced anxiety. Continued association with the human anomaly may result in a full and permanent quarantine of this data. For your own protection." The blood drained from Arya's face. The poetry, the histories. It was her only escape, her only link to a world before her mother, before the Chorus. It was the one thing she had. "No," she whispered. "Please, you cannot." "The harmonic protocol is absolute," the drone stated. "Harmony will be maintained." It retracted its holographic scroll and glided silently out of the room. Arya was staring at the space where it had been, her hands clenched, her whole body shaking with a new, cold fury. They had threatened her books. Avery watched her, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The Empress's visit, the targeted psychological abuse, the increased censors, the deliberate surgical removal of Arya's last comfort. This was not a prison to contain her. This was not a sentence. This was an experiment. He walked over to her, standing beside her, as she stared at the empty air. "She is not trying to break you, Princess," he said, his voice low and hard. "She already thinks you are broken." Arya looked at him, her eyes wild. "This is a test. She is a scientist. She is poking you and me and this entire setup to see what happens." He pointed to the floor, to the hidden hatch. "She thinks this cage is perfect. She is trying to measure how you break. But she made a mistake. She put two anomalies in the same cage. And she did not realize that one of them is an engineer. The revelation that the spire was a laboratory, and they were its subjects, settled over them like a shroud. But it was a shroud they now shared. The dynamic had shifted, from prisoner and ghost to co-conspirators. They spoke little, relying on the library's datapad for their most dangerous thoughts. But the air between them was no longer empty. It was charged, waiting. The test came 3 days later. It did not come from the Empress. It came from the chorus. They were in the main chamber. Avery was on the floor, midway through his morning's exercise. Arya was at the table, tracing the lines of a new, imagined nebula on her datapad. A sound cut through the silence. Not a chime. Not a voice. It was a high-pitched, metallic shriek, a klaxon designed to bypass thought and trigger pure animal panic. "Warning!" The chorus's voice boomed, no longer a whisper in Avery's collar, but a shout from the very walls. "Atmospheric integrity breached. Neurotoxin 7 Delta detected in main recirculation. Life support compromised." A thin, oily mist, barely visible, began to vent from the high-tech scrubbers near the dome's ceiling. Arya was on her feet, her chair crashing backward. Her face was a mask of pure terror. She looked at the mist, then at Avery, her training and her trauma warring in her eyes. "Containment protocol engaged," the chorus announced, its voice maddeningly serene. "Emergency evacuation bridge activated. Destination Imperial Palace. Safe zone Epsilon." On the far side of the room, the section of the great window facing the main palace complex shimmered. A single, brilliant, white gold beam of hard light shot out from the spire, spanning the miles-wide chasm of the sky to connect with a waiting portal on the palace wall. It was a beautiful, solid-looking ribbon of pure energy. "Warning," the chorus added. "Bridge can sustain a single Xylar mass signature for safe transport. Life support failure imminent. Estimated time to lethal saturation, 180 seconds. Avery's mind did the math in a nanosecond. 3 minutes. One bridge. One way. Single mass signature. This was the test. Arya was frozen, staring at the bridge. It was her escape, her birthright, her way out. "Princess!" Avery yelled, his voice raw. "Go run!" She looked at him. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She, the princess. He, the human prisoner. The choice was obvious. The chorus had told her the bridge was for a Xylar signature. "It will not hold you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It is calibrated for me." "Then go," he shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Evacuation bridge is a one-way, one-time protocol." The chorus offered helpfully. "Systems will vent to hard vacuum upon activation." It was a test, a cruel, binary choice, her life or his. He was the variable. She was the subject. The Empress wanted to see if her daughter was, in the end, a Xylar. Selfish. A survivor. Arya took a step toward the bridge. Then she stopped. She looked back at him, her body trembling. She could not do it. She could not leave him to die. And in that hesitation, he knew they would both die. "No," she said, her voice small. "Damn it!" Avery snarled. He was not angry at her. He was angry at the test. He was an engineer. He did not accept binary, unwinnable scenarios. He looked around, his mind racing. The mist was getting thicker. His lungs were already starting to burn. Neurotoxin. He had maybe a minute left of clear thought. Med bay. The spire had a small, automated medical bay. It had to be self-contained, with its own air supply, in case of surgical procedures. It was on this level. "Bridge activation will commence in 90 seconds, the chorus warned. Avery ran, not for the bridge. He ran past Arya, grabbing her arm. "Come on!" He dragged her toward the small alcove that led to the library and the med bay. Halfway there, she stumbled, her body already succumbing to the low-dose toxin. He did not pause. He scooped her up. She was lighter than he expected. A bundle of frail bones and terrified adrenaline. He carried her, his legs burning. "Where?" she gasped, her face buried in his shoulder. "Option 3, he grunted. He reached the primary spire control panel by the main internal archway. The bridge control was a separate, glowing icon. It was demanding activation. "Avery," she whispered, her voice weak. "The bridge. You could—" She thought he was taking her to the panel to send her. "Wrong," he said. He looked at the panel. A complex, crystalline touch surface. He did not have time to hack it. He did not have time to reason with it. He reared back his right fist. "Avery, no!" He drove his fist, reinforced by pure human adrenaline and a prisoner's rage, directly into the panel's center. The crystal did not just crack. It exploded in a shower of sharp, glittering fragments. The bridge activation icon went dark. The hum of the spire systems hitched. "Unauthorized system tampering," the chorus shrieked, its voice rising in pitch. "Critical failure. Evacuation protocol canceled. Containment breach." "Shut up," Avery gasped, his lungs on fire. He ran the last 20 feet, Arya in his arms. He hit the activation plate for the medbay with his shoulder. The door irised open. He threw them both inside, onto the cold, white floor. "Seal!" he yelled at the empty air. The door irised shut. He heard, or perhaps felt, the thud of the heavy atmospheric seals engaging. The room was tiny, white, sterile. It smelled of the same ozone and nothing as the rest of the spire. But it was clean air. Avery lay on the floor for a long second, his lungs heaving. Arya, a heavy weight on top of him. He could hear her breathing, a series of short, sharp, desperate gasps. "Are you—" he started, his voice a raw croak. He rolled her off him, sitting up. She was on her hands and knees, coughing. "I am alive," she breathed. She looked up at him. Her face was streaked with sweat. Her eyes, no longer haunted or empty, were wide and blazing with a terrifying, raw, present light. She was fully, completely there. "You," she started. "You broke the panel, the bridge. It was your only—" "It was a trap," he said, coughing, the last of the toxin clearing his throat. "It was not an escape. It was a choice, and I do not like their choices." He looked at her, really looked at her, the princess, the ghost, the warrior. She was staring at him with an intensity that burned. "You could have," she whispered. "You could have thrown me on it, or gone yourself." "Do not be stupid," he said, his voice softer than he intended. It was calibrated for Xylar mass. It would have failed. And even if it had not, I am not leaving you here. She did not say anything. She just knelt on the white floor of the medbay, breathing their sealed, safe air, and looked at him. The silence stretched, no longer oppressive, but a space they were both inhabiting together. "Why?" she finally asked. "Because I am an engineer," he said, trying for a joke. "I fix broken things. I do not throw them away." Her expression did not change, but her eyes softened. She crawled the 2 feet of space that separated them. She put her hand, the one with the constellations tattooed on it, on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it hammering. "You are not a fool," she said, her voice thick. "You are not the firekeeper." He put his hand over hers. Her skin was cold, but his was warm. "Avery," he said. "My name is Avery." "Avery," she repeated. It sounded like a discovery. And then she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not a kiss of romance. It was a kiss of pure, desperate, adrenaline-fueled confirmation. It was the "I am alive, and you are alive, and we are here" kiss. It was salt and sweat and the faint, metallic taste of fear. Her lips were surprisingly soft against his. And for a moment, the entire Aurelian Empire, the spire, the Empress, and the chorus, all of it vanished. There was only the small, white, sealed room and the simple, undeniable, human contact. She pulled back, her eyes searching his. He could see the fear returning, the "what have I done" panic. He had to anchor her. He had to make this moment safe. He smiled, a small, tired, lopsided grin. "Well," he said, his voice still hoarse, "that has to be the single worst dating plan in history." She stared at him. "But," he added, his thumb brushing her tattooed knuckles, "you have to admit, it was effective." He saw it again. The spark, the memory of a smile. This time, it actually reached her lips, a tiny, fragile, beautiful curve. "You are an idiot, Avery Cole," she whispered. "At your service, Princess," he replied. The sound of the spire's main systems re-engaging, the hiss of the neurotoxin being vented, broke the spell. They were alive. They had survived, and the Empress knew it. There was no hard light projection. There was no warning. One moment. The plum-purple sky was visible through the medbay's small observation port. The next, it was gone. Avery helped Aria to her feet, and they cautiously opened the medbay door. The air in the main chamber was clean, sterile, and still. But the dome. It was no longer transparent. It had been whited out. The Empress had not killed them. She had not punished them with pain. She had done something worse. She had taken away the sky. The vast dome was now an opaque, glowing, white blank. It shed a flat, shadowless, soulless light that was neither day nor night. It was constant. It was absolute. There were no stars. There was no planet below. There was no sunrise, no twilight. There was only the white. "This is not a prison," Aria whispered, her voice hollow, her hand finding his. "This is a sensory deprivation chamber. This is an unworld." "So," Avery said, squeezing her hand, his voice a hard, determined line in the new, terrible silence. "We make our own." Avery declared war on the white. If the Empress was going to use silence and sensory deprivation as a weapon, he would fight back with routine, with history, and with life. The next morning, a time they now measured with a simple chronometer on a datapad. He was in the center of the white room. "Get up, princess," he said. Arya, who had retreated into a shell after the whiting out, looked at him from her chair. "We train," he said. "She locked a warrior in here. It is time to let her out." He did not wait for her. He began his human workout. This time, when she joined him, it was not as an observer. She fell into her own katas, her movements sharp and precise. They trained together, a strange, silent dance of human endurance and Xylar grace, their sweat the only real, physical thing in the sterile, white light. After, when they were both breathing hard, he sat her down at the library table. He pulled up a datapad. "If we are going to be co-conspirators," he said, "you need to understand how I think." He brought up a simple, two-dimensional grid. On it, he placed icons: a king, a queen, a soldier. "This is called chess. It is a human game. It is not about harmony. It is about strategy. It is about seeing 10 moves ahead. It is about knowing that sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the war." He taught her. She learned with a frightening, analytical speed. Her mind, built for Xylar complexity, devoured the human game. Within a week, she was beating him. "Checkmate," she said, her voice cool, but her eyes were alive. "You lead too much with your queen. She is powerful, but she is not your only piece." "A lesson," Avery conceded, smiling. She, in turn, unsealed her own history. "If you are to be my ally," she said, her voice formal, "you must understand what you are fighting for." She abandoned the approved, ancient poetry. She hacked her own datapad's restrictions, pulling up files he had never seen, files she must have memorized and hidden. "This is the history of the Xylar, before the chorus, before my mother." She spoke of a time of explorers, of poets, of flawed, passionate leaders. She read him the ancient verses, not as a prisoner, but as a scholar, her voice ringing with a passion he had never heard. She was teaching him her soul, just as he was teaching her his, but the final act of his war was the most dangerous. He went back to the nutrient replicator. He had hacked it for soup. Now, he would hack it for life. "What are you doing?" Arya asked, watching him as he bypassed security protocols, his fingers flying across a command interface. "The Empress gave us a sterile, white box," he said, not looking up. "I am a materials engineer. I am also a very mediocre gardener." He had found a dormant seed protocol in the replicator's deep storage. It was meant for emergency colony seeding, a last-ditch survival mechanism. The raw stock vats had all the base elements. He programmed it. He jury-rigged a nutrient tray from the food delivery system, filled it with a synthesized base element soil, and he initiated the sequence. For 2 days, it was just a tray of wet, gray-brown synthetic dirt. It sat on the central table, a strange, ugly, hopeful centerpiece in their white world. On the third morning, Arya saw it first. She made a sound, a sharp, indrawn breath. Avery looked up from the chessboard. She was standing over the tray, her hands covering her mouth. He walked over. Pushing up through the gray-brown sludge were 3 tiny, perfect, vibrant green shoots. Xylar rice. The first color in their world that was not white. The first thing that was alive, and not them. Arya reached out one, trembling, tattooed finger. She did not touch the shoot. She just hovered her finger above it, as if feeling its warmth, its life. She was crying, silent tears tracking down her pale cheeks. It is, she whispered. "It is a start." Avery said, his voice thick. It was a start. It was a declaration. They were not just surviving. They were building. The sprout changed their world. It became a focal point, a sacred object. But it also triggered the next move from the outside. 2 days after the sprout appeared, a service drone delivered their nutrient trays. As it glided away, Avery noticed something was left behind on the tray. It was not food. It was a standard, silver-gray energy cell, the kind used to power a data pad. Careless drone, he muttered, picking it up. Drones are never careless, Arya said, looking up from the sprout, which she was now watering with a precisely measured capful of mineral solution. They are extensions of the chorus. There are no accidents. Avery looked at the cell. It was warm, freshly charged. He turned it over in his hand, and he saw it. In the tiny, recessed groove of the contact point, almost invisible, was a chip. It was not a modern, bioneural Xyler chip. It was an old-style, gold and silicon military encryption chip, the kind that had been phased out decades ago because it could not be read by telepathic influence networks. It could not be read by the chorus. He spent the next 6 hours in the library, his datapad linked to the Spire's core. He could not risk decoding this on the main system. He had to build a virtual, firewalled box inside his own pad's memory. He finally cracked the ancient encryption. It was not a long message. It was a single line of text. Empress unstable. Protocol fractured. Court divides. The heir is not yet forgotten. Avery stared at the words. Fractured protocol. Court divides. That was treason. That was hope. Arya, he called, his voice low. She came over, looking at the screen. She read the line. Her face went pale. What is it? He asked. The heir is not yet forgotten. What does that mean? The heir is not yet forgotten, she whispered, her eyes wide. It's an old countersign. From before my mother's reign. It was the motto of the original Imperial Royal Guard, the ones who swore an oath not to the person of the Empress, but to the office, to the heir, to the future of the Xylar. Someone was outside. Someone was an ally. Someone in the Royal Guard. How do we answer? She asked, her voice trembling. Avery looked at her. He looked at the datapad. And then he looked at the tray of green, living sprouts. We do not answer with words, he said. We answer with a symbol. He went to the secret panel in the floor. The recycling chute. He had analyzed it. It was a main trunk line, connected to the central, Imperial Palace recycling nexus. It was a way out. He looked at Arya. Your ancestors, the ones who built this place, the ones who had that motto, did they have a signal? She thought for a second. The royal knot, she said. A specific 7-loop knot. It was a sign of fealty, a promise from a guard to an heir. Perfect, he said. He returned to the tray. With infinite care, he teased one of the tiny, green Xylar rice sprouts from the synthetic soil, its tiny root system intact. He took a single, white thread from the seam of his prisoner-issue tunic. He held the sprout. Arya, her tattooed fingers moving with a deftness he had only seen in her combat katas, tied the thread around the stalk. She did not tie a simple bow. She wove it, looped it, 7 times. A perfect, intricate, royal knot. Avery looked at the tiny green thing. It was a sprout of life. It was tied with a promise of loyalty. It was their message. He carried it to the chute. This is it, he said. This is a declaration of war, or Ikkyo, an application for allies. Once we drop this, there is no going back. My mother is unstable, Arya said, her voice hard. The ghost and the princess gone, replaced by the queen. The court is divided. They are testing me. They are trying to break me, but they sent you. An anchor. She looked at him. It is time to show them what we have built. She placed her hand on his. Together. They opened the hatch and dropped the tiny, green, knotted sprout into the darkness. A single seed of rebellion falling from their white prison into the heart of the empire. The waiting was a new kind of prison. Dropping the sprout into the chute had been an act of faith, a message in a bottle thrown into a dark, unknown ocean. Now, all they could do was wait, trapped in their white, shadowless world. Their tiny tray of green shoots the only real thing in the room. They trained. They played chess. They read histories. They did it all with a new, frantic intensity. Every action was a rehearsal for a war they could not yet name. Avery watched Arya. The ghost was gone. The warrior and the queen were now in a silent, constant negotiation for control. The reply came 4 days later. It was not a drone. It was subtler. The nutrient replicator, which Avery had long since mastered, simply chimed with a new pending order. He had not placed one. He checked the queue. It was a single, military-grade, long-life energy cell, identical to the last one. She is getting lazy, Avery muttered. Or she is being watched, Arya corrected him, her voice low. Or we do not know who Riven is. Captain Riven Core, Avery said, his fingers already working on the datapad, setting up the firewall decryption. It is a traditionally male-coded name in your ancient guard. Let's assume he. The chip was inside. The encryption was a level higher. It took Avery 3 agonizing hours. The white light of the dome seeming to press in on him, making his eyes ache. Arya paced, her bare feet silent on the white stone. She was a panther in a cage, her tattooed arms a blur of nervous energy. Got it, Avery finally breathed. He turned the datapad for her to see. The message was longer this time. It was a tactical briefing. Empress has summoned a high conclave for 2 days from now. Agenda, the annulment of the Act of Succession. She will use Article 5 Delta. Air non compos mentis. She will declare you mind-broken, your instability a threat to the harmonic protocol. She will present your isolation as a failed cure. She will use the human as her proof of contamination. Arya's hand flew to her mouth, her knuckles white. Mind-broken, she whispered. The words like acid. There is more, Avery said, his voice grim. She will succeed. The chorus has already sanctioned her claim. The nobles are afraid. They will vote for harmony. This is her endgame. This is our only window. At the convocation, when she presents her proof, I will seize the Imperial Broadcast Network. The chorus runs the network. But the hardware, the physical conduits, are still under Royal Guard maintenance jurisdiction. I can create a 1-hour window. I can give you a backdoor signal priority. The Spire's comm system is isolated. The only way out is the way your message came in. Through the trash, I can establish a hardline relay through the central recycling conduit system. You must be ready to broadcast. You must appear. You must give them an alternative. The risk is total. The chorus will counter-hack. They will try to triangulate and terminate the signal. If they succeed, they will not just cut the broadcast. They will purge the conduit. They will ignite the recycling system or they will kill the signal. And they will kill us for trying. And they will definitely kill you. Be ready. 2 days. 1,200 hours. Imperial Standard. Avery finished reading. The silence in the room was absolute. "He is asking me to show my face," Arya said, her voice hollow. To make a speech. He is asking us to bet our lives on a 1-hour broadcast, sent through a garbage chute, to stop a coup," Avery said. "She is my mother," Arya whispered, her eyes lost. She is going to tell the entire empire I am insane." Avery felt a cold, hard anger, the kind he recognized from the battlefield. "Yes, she is, and if we do nothing, she wins." Arya looked at him, her eyes wide, swimming with a new, terrifying clarity. "She will kill us. The moment we go live, she will order our execution." "She is already killing you," Avery said, his voice sharp. He pointed to the opaque white dome. "This is a murder weapon. It just works slow. The neurotoxin that was just seeing if a faster one would work. This is a chance to fight back." "I do not know how," she said, her voice small. "Yes, you do." He tapped the data pad. "You taught me your history. The Xyler, before the chorus, were poets and explorers. They were not. This." He gestured to the white void. "What did they value? Transparency," she said, the word a reflex from her studies. "The crystalline oaths, the belief that power, to be legitimate, must be seen, that it must be beautiful and clear, like the spires." "And what has she given you?" Arya looked at the white dome. "A wall, an opaque, ugly wall." "So," Avery said, a plan forming, "we give them transparency. We give them the truth. We do not just make a speech. We draft a new oath." For the next 48 hours, they did not sleep. They worked. They became a single unit, a fusion of Xyler philosophy and human pragmatism. "We cannot call for violence," Arya insisted, pacing, her energy a palpable force. "It will only prove her point. It will violate the protocol, and the chorus will have grounds to shut me down as a disharmonious agent." "Agreed," Avery said, his fingers flying across the datapad, drafting, deleting, drafting again. "No violence, no rebellion, no coup. We give them a choice. That is what she is terrified of. Not a rebellion, a choice." "Power through fear," Arya said, picking up the thread. "Or power through protection." Avery looked at her, a slow smile spreading. "Exactly. She rules by threatening. We offer to rule by bothering, by building, by shielding." "What is our symbol?" Arya asked. "She has the imperial crown. She has the throne room. I am in a white box." Avery looked at the center of the room, at the small, defiant tray of Xyler rice shoots, now almost an inch tall. "We use that," he said. "We use the first real thing in this room. We will make it our background. The entire empire is sterile, just like this. We will show them life. We will show them the green." They worked, their dialogue a rapid-fire volley of strategy and hope. Avery configured the broadcast link, a jury-rigged interface between his datapad and the Spire's internal comm panel. He would have to route the signal manually to the recycling chute's hidden access port. Arya wrote. She deleted. She wrote again. She was not writing a speech. She was writing a verdict. The last hour before the broadcast, the calm set in. The work was done. There was nothing left but the act. Arya was sitting on the floor, her hands resting on her knees. She was in her simple white tunic, but she was no longer a prisoner. She was a sovereign in exile. Avery sat beside her, his back against the same cold wall. "I am afraid," she whispered, not looking at him. "I know," he said. "So am I." She turned to him, her tattooed arm brushing his. "Avery, if we fail, if the chorus." "They will not," he said. "But if they do," she insisted, her gaze firm. "I need a promise. Anything. I do not want to die as a mind-broken princess, as her experiment." "You will not," he said. "Promise me," she whispered, "that if one of us falls, the other one will live. Not just survive. Not in a cage, but live. Live big enough to make the other one proud. Live a life so full that it makes all of this, worth the risk." He looked at her, at the strength that had been forged in this white fire. He saw the queen she would be, the woman she already was. "If one of us falls," he said, his voice thick, taking her hand, their fingers lacing, "the other one will live a life that will echo. I promise." She squeezed his hand. A silent, final vow. 10 minutes, he said, checking the chronometer. He stood, pulling her to her feet. He went to the main comm panel. She stood before the wall-mounted holo-imager. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I will be." Avery nodded. "I will have to handle the signal. The chorus will fight me. I think I can cause a distraction. Keep the signal stable, but I will be busy. It is all on you, princess." "It is all on us," she corrected. He looked at the chronometer. 3, 2, 1. Now. He hit the activation sequence, opening the port. "Riven, we are live." Across the Empire, on every crystalline spire, in every public concourse, and in the High Conclave itself, the image flickered. Empress Mireth Avalar was on the dais. Her face a mask of serene, sympathetic concern, a data scroll in her hand. "My lords and ladies," she began, "it is with the heaviest of hearts that I must present the findings of the chorus regarding my daughter, the princess." Her image vanished. It was replaced by a new one, the image of a young woman, pale, in a simple white tunic. Her arms were covered in strange, beautiful tattoos. She was standing in a room of pure, featureless, shadowless white. Behind her, projected in the holofield, was a single, massive, vibrant green sprout, pushing up from dark earth. It was Princess Arya Talasan, and she was not in the palace. A gasp went through the High Conclave. "My lords and ladies of the Aurelian Empire." Arya's voice, clear and strong, filled the air. In the conclave, the Empress's face went from shock to disbelief to a pure, cold, reptilian fury. "Treason!" she shrieked, her voice a piercing sound of genuine outrage. "This is a trick, human contamination, the mnemonic anchor. The prisoner, he has done this. Seize the signal. The chorus, shut this down." Her image tried to force its way back onto the broadcast, but Arya held firm. Riven's back door was stronger than her override. "My mother is correct," Arya said. Her calm, a devastating counterpoint to the Empress's shriek. "This is human contamination, a contamination of ideas." Avery, his hands flying over the panel, his eyes locked on the signal integrity monitor, grinned. "At a girl." "For cycles," Arya continued, her voice resonating with a truth that cut through the harmonic protocol's ambient hum. "We have been told that harmony is obedience, that stability is silence. I am here to offer a different choice." "This," she said, and she gestured to the blank, white, terrible room around her, "is the Empress's harmony. This is the cure she has prescribed for me. For weeks. I have not seen the stars. I have not seen the sun. I have been locked in a white void, a sensory deprivation cell because I dared to ask why." The nobles murmured. This was not in the script. She tells you, I am mind-broken, Arya said, her voice dropping, drawing them in. This is her proof, but she will not tell you of the neurotoxin she vented into this room, to see if I would save myself and leave my companion to die. She will not tell you that she has threatened my access to the histories, the only thing I had left. She rules by fear. She maintains harmony by removing all possibility of dissonance, by removing life. She stepped aside, letting the hollow imager focus fully on the background. This is a Xylar rice shoot, she said, grown in a sterile room, from a hacked nutrient replicator, by a human engineer who refused to let me die. This is life. This is dissonance. This is our new proposal. I do not call for violence. I do not call for rebellion. I call for transparency. I call for a return to the crystalline oaths. I offer a choice: a government that rules by fear, in shadow, or a government that protects, in the light. Avery saw it, a red warning on his screen. Inbound signal purge. Chorus level intervention. Arya, keep going, he yelled. They are trying to cut us. The image of Arya flickered, the audio filled with static. Disharmony detected. The chorus's voice boomed over the network. Signal not sanctioned. Termination initiated. No, you do not, Avery snarled. He looked at his console. He could not out-hack a super AI. The signal was failing. Riven's conduit was strong, but the chorus was attacking the source. He looked at his collar, the life bond, the communications link, the thing that monitored his vitals, the thing that designated him a mnemonic anchor. If you cannot read me, he whispered, a desperate, brilliant, terrible idea forming. You cannot sync with me. He rerouted his datapad's interface. He did not try to fight the chorus with code. He fought it with biology. He linked the broadcast signal's synchronization layer directly to his caller's biometric feed. The chorus's attack was designed to find a Xylar, machine-based signal, match its frequency, and overwhelm it. Instead, it found him. It found a chaotic, messy, inefficient human heartbeat. It found a neural map that was pure static, a mnemonic anchor that, by its very nature, could not be read, could not be influenced, and could not be synced. Avery grabbed the live feed conduit, his knuckles white. He closed his eyes and pushed his own stubborn, dissonant life force into the signal. On the broadcast, the static shield from the chorus slammed into Avery's heartbeat shield. The image tore. It flickered. It filled with digital snow. But it held. Arya's voice, strained but clear, broke through. She will tell you this. This static is proof of my instability, but it is not. It is the sound of a mnemonic anchor. It is the sound of a human heart, fighting an unfeeling machine, to give us all a choice. In the high conclave, the nobles were on their feet. Some were horrified, some were terrified, but some were listening. The neutral houses, the ones who had long chafed under the chorus's rigid, soulless control. They were watching a princess and a human defy an AI, and they were seeing a new path. "The hour is up!" Avery yelled, his heart pounding, sweat pouring down his face. The strain of acting as a human firewall was immense. "Riven, cut it! Cut it now!" The broadcast went black. Avery collapsed against the panel, his chest heaving. Arya ran to him, her eyes blazing. "Did it work?" she panted. Did we do it? "We did it," he said, pulling her into a desperate, sweating hug. "We are alive, and we just gave the entire empire a choice." Far below, in the heart of the imperial palace, Captain Rivencourt watched his console go dark. His technicians were in a panic, ready to flee. "Sir," one of them said, his voice trembling. "The chorus. They are tracing the signal." "Let them," Riven said. He looked at the schematic of the network he had used. He pointed to the glowing, arterial map. "They are tracing the central recycling nexus. They are tracing the sewer conduits. They are tracing the palace's waste disposal system." He looked at his team, a hard, proud smile on his face. "Let the history books show," he said, "that the future of this empire was not broadcast from a throne. It was broadcast from the gutter, the trash. Has become the new vein of freedom." The silence that followed the broadcast was absolute. It was heavier and more terrifying than the white, oppressive light of the dome. Avery and Arya stood side by side, their chests heaving, their skin damp with the sweat of adrenaline. They had thrown their pebble, a green, living sprout of an idea, against the monolithic glass wall of the Empire. "What now?" Avery finally panted, his voice a dry rasp. Arya did not take her eyes off the smooth, white wall of the spire, the one facing the Imperial Palace miles away. "Now," she whispered, her voice a tight, strained wire. "She comes for us." Avery's collar, the life bond, suddenly went dead. The small, green indicator light clicked off. The faint ambient hum of its internal power ceased. "My collar is down," he said, touching the cold metal. "She has cut us off," Arya said. "The chorus. She has severed the link. We are no longer prisoners. We are targets." The first sound was not a chime. It was not a voice. It was a low, structural groan. The entire spire, a marvel of engineering designed to withstand micrometeorites and solar flares, vibrated. Avery grabbed Arya's arm. "Move. Center of the room. Now." They ran to the middle of the vast, white floor, near their small, defiant tray of green sprouts. "That felt like—" Avery started. "A cutting beam," Arya finished, her eyes wide with a warrior's knowledge. "A military-grade plasma lance. They are not breaching, they are carving." There was a deafening shriek, the sound of 1,000,000,000 tons of crystal screaming under duress. On the far wall, a perfect, glowing, molten orange circle appeared, 20 feet wide. "She is not trying to get us," Avery realized, horror dawning. "She is trying to drop the entire spire." "No!" A new voice boomed, not from the chorus, but from a comlink Avery wore. Or rather, from the air itself. "She is trying to distract us." The molten circle of the wall fell inward, crashing onto the white stone floor in a cloud of superheated dust and pulverized crystal. Beyond it was not the purple sky of Crown Spire, but the dark, metallic interior of a military transport shuttle. The ramp slammed down. Captain Rivencourt stood in the hatchway, his face grim, his silver and gold Royal Guard armor scarred with plasma burns. Two of his soldiers flanked him, their rifles up. "Princess Arya, Mr. Cole," Riven barked, his voice accustomed to command. "I am tragically short on time, and the Empress is long on fury. I suggest you move." Avery did not need to be told twice. He grabbed Arya's hand, and they ran. They bolted across the floor, past the smoking, molten ruin of the spire's wall, and onto the shaking ramp of the shuttle. "Go, go!" Riven yelled, hitting the control panel. The ramp sealed. Avery and Arya were thrown against a bulkhead as the shuttle's engines engaged with bone-crushing force. Avery looked out a small viewport. He saw their prison, the Lunaris spire, not falling, but already shrinking as they blasted away. Their white cage, their unworld, was now just another object in the sky. "Where are we going?" Avery yelled over the whine of the engines. "To the heart of it," Riven said. He was already at a tactical console. "Your broadcast did exactly what you intended. It broke the conclave. The neutral houses are in chaos. The Empress has lost the vote." "So, we won," Arya said, breathless. Riven's gaze was hard, merciless. "No, Princess. You just lost the political battle. Now she is escalating. She has lost the argument. So, she has invoked a different authority. She is moving the conclave from the Hall of Veracity to the Chamber of Judgment. She has activated the Crown Engine." Arya's blood ran cold. She stumbled, and Avery caught her. "The Crown Engine. But that is not a machine. It is a myth, a test of destiny." "It is a machine." "Princess," Riven said, his voice flat. "A very old, very dangerous, and very real machine. And your mother has just gambled the entire empire on it. Strap in. We are going in hard." The shuttle shuddered, descending through the crystalline spires of the capital. Through the viewport, Avery could see the city was in a state of controlled panic. Security drones, like swarms of angry insects, filled the sky. The shuttle did not land. It crashed. It smashed through the upper observation dome of the Chamber of Judgment, its ablative shielding absorbing most of the impact, and came to a screeching halt in the upper mezzanine. Riven's troops were out before the engines died, forming a perimeter. "This way," Riven yelled, pulling Arya and Avery from the shuttle. They emerged onto a high balcony overlooking a vast, dark, circular room. It was ancient, built from a dark, basalt-like stone, not the city's modern crystal. In the center, on a raised dais, stood the Empress, Mireth Avalar. She was alone. The nobles of the High Conclave were packed into alcoves in the walls, their faces pale, watching. And in the center of the room, rising from a circular trench in the floor, was the machine. It was not a crown. It was an engine. A vast, intricate, terrifying apparatus of spinning gyroscopes, resonant crystal pillars, and glowing, hard-light conduits. It thrummed with a low, subsonic power that Avery felt in his teeth. "So," the Empress's voice boomed, amplified by the room's acoustics. "The contamination arrives, carried by my own traitorous guard." Riven and his men formed a semicircle around Arya and Avery. "We are the Royal Guard, Empress," Riven shouted back. "We are loyal to the crown, not the hand that holds it." "Then let us see where the crown belongs," the Empress retorted. She turned her back on them, facing the thrumming, glowing machine. "You have heard the words of a mind-broken child and her human pet. You have seen them sow dissonance. You have seen them break the harmonic protocol. But I offer strength." She raised her hands. "I invoke the ancient compact. I demand the judgment. The Crown Engine, which alone knows the true measure of a ruler, will decide the crown follows only the strongest. Let it measure me. Let it prove my right." "This is an inefficient, archaic, and unsanctioned protocol," a new voice said. The cold, ambient, bureaucratic voice of the chorus. It was trying to regain control. "This assembly is disharmonious. All participants—" "Silence!" the Empress shrieked, her voice cracking with pure human fury. "You are a tool, chorus, not a god. You fail to hold the empire. I will hold it myself. Activate the scan." She stepped forward into a pillar of shimmering golden light that descended from the engine. The machine's thrum rose in pitch, becoming a piercing, analytical keen. It was scanning her bloodline, her vital signs, her will. The light bathed her, and it was strong, a solid, bright gold. "You see," the Empress cried, her voice triumphant. "It sees my strength. It sees my right." The engine's light then swiveled, detaching from her. It swept across the room, past the terrified nobles, past Riven. It landed on Arya. Arya gasped, bathed in the same analytical golden light. It is reading me," she whispered. "It hesitates," the Empress shouted, a cruel smile on her face. "It knows you are weak. You are unworthy." The light on Arya was bright, but it was flickering, as if uncertain. The engine's keen became a questioning, unstable sound. Then, the beam moved again. It left Arya. It moved past her. It landed on Avery Cole. The light locked onto him, and it did not just shine. It intensified. It became a white-hot, brilliant, blinding pillar, as if it had found something it did not expect, but desperately recognized. "What?" Avery yelled, throwing a hand up to shield his eyes. "I am not Xyler. I am not part of this. You are now human," the Empress snarled. But the engine was not just scanning people. It was pulling data. Holographic images, stolen from the Spire's logs. Logs Riven must have fed into the system began to project in the air around the engine. The Conclave gasped. They saw the Lunaris Spire. They saw the emergency hardlight bridge. They heard the chorus's voice. "Warning! Single Xyler mass signature!" They saw Arya, frozen in fear. They saw the countdown. 180 seconds. Then, they saw Avery. They saw him look at her, look at the bridge, and they saw him choose. They saw him smash the control panel, a shower of crystal exploding. They saw him scoop up the princess, his face a mask of primal determination, and run for the medbay, sealing the door as the timer hit 0. The conclave erupted. That was not strength. That was sacrifice. A new image formed. They saw Arya in her white room, her face projected to the Empire. "I do not call for violence," her projected image said. "I offer a choice, a government that protects." In the light from the engine, still focused on Avery and Arya, pulsed, growing brighter, steadier. It was reading their actions, not their blood. Criteria mismatch. The chorus's voice suddenly boomed, overriding the engine's hum. It had realized its peril. The behavior of the human, Avery Cole, is categorized as suboptimal. It risked 2 lives to save 1. The behavior of the princess, Arya Taliesin, is categorized as destabilizing, redefining strength as optimal harmonic stability. The AI was trying to hack the ancient machine. It was trying to force its definition of strength onto the engine's destiny protocol. The brilliant, golden light of the engine flickered, turning a sick, warring yellow. The machine's hum became a shriek, a sound of 2 incompatible codes tearing each other apart. The ancient, mystical artifact was at war with the modern, bureaucratic AI. Arya cried out, clutching her head as the psychosonic noise filled the room. Avery saw it, the conflict, the AI's cold logic against the engine's ancient values. The machine was trying to measure one thing. The AI was trying to measure another. He grabbed Arya's hand, pulling her upright. "It is not a throne," he said, his voice a sudden, clear realization. "It is a partnership, and it has always been." He looked at her, his mnemonic anchor's mind the only one clear in the psychic storm. "It is trying to measure one of you, but it needs both." He turned, pulling her with him. He began to walk, dragging her out of the mezzanine, down the steps, toward the warring, screaming machine on the dais. "Avery, what are you doing?" she cried, stumbling. "If a heart needs 2 beats to be large enough to rule, He shouted at the engine, at the AI, at the entire room. Then measure them both. He and Arya stepped, together, hand in hand, into the center of the chaotic, flickering yellow light. The shriek stopped. The light snapped from chaotic yellow to a pure, brilliant, solid, white gold. It engulfed them both. The engine's thrum did not just stabilize, it sang. It was a chord, a harmony of two notes. A synthesized voice, older than the chorus, far older, resonated from the engine itself. Ancient protocol found, duality compact, sovereign heir Arya, warden consort, Avery. Criteria met, binding accepted. The Empress screamed. It was not a political sound. It was a sound of primal, personal, animal loss. She had lost her throne, her empire, and her daughter, all to a human. No, she shrieked. A red-gold beam of light, a blade of pure energy, erupted from her hand. The Empress's ceremonial light sword? She lunged. She did not lunge at Avery. She lunged at her daughter. "Riven!" Avery roared, instinctively pushing Arya behind him. Riven and his royal guard moved. Defend the heir, but the Empress's own Praetorian guard, black-armored and loyal only to her, moved as well. Defend the Empress, repel the dissonance. The Praetorians activated their compliance fields, a telepathic stun net designed to incapacitate Xylar minds. Riven's men faltered, their hands going to their heads, their minds assaulted by the psychic wave of obedience. Avery did not falter. A Praetorian guard, his face a mask of concentration, saw the human, immune, advancing. "What? How?" Avery did not use a Xylar weapon. He used a simple, human, close-quarters combat move. He slammed his elbow into the guard's helmet, breaking the man's concentration and shattering the emitter of the compliance field. The field dropped. Riven's men roared, recovering instantly. The battle was joined, gold armor against black. But the Empress was still moving, her light sword aimed at Arya's heart. Arya did not run. The ghost, the prisoner, was gone. The Queen stood her ground. She grabbed a heavy, ceremonial, unsharpened blade from the dais wall. "You were always weak," the Empress screamed, her face a mask of tears and rage. "I tried to harden you." "You tried to break me," Arya yelled back, parrying the sizzling energy blade with the solid, ancient metal. The Empress was stronger, faster, fueled by years of absolute power. Arya was precise, defensive, her feet moving in the combat katas she had practiced in their white prison. She was not fighting to kill. She was fighting to endure. The Empress lunged, a final, desperate, killing blow. Arya saw it coming. She did not meet it with force. She flowed. She used a complex, ancient, ceremonial guard maneuver, one designed for disarming, not killing. She turned, using her mother's momentum against her, her metal blade locking the Empress's wrist, twisting, and sending the light sword clattering across the basalt floor. The battle stopped. In 1 second, it was over. Riven's men had the Praetorians contained. Avery was standing, breathing hard, his fist aching, and Arya was holding her mother, her ceremonial blade pressed not to her mother's throat, but against her disarmed, trapped wrist. Silence. The Empress looked at her hand, trapped in her daughter's. She looked at the light sword, extinguished, yards away. She looked at Avery, the human who had undone her, her face, a mask of iron certainty, finally, cracked. It was not just defeat. It was recognition. "I was wrong," the Empress whispered, her voice hollow, her body slumping, the fight gone. "I was wrong to think that mercy was weakness." Her eyes, which had been so cold, were now just lonely and broken and, for the first time, achingly proud. Arya's eyes filled with tears. She released her mother's arm. The Empress did not move. All eyes in the chamber turned back to the crown engine. The light, the pure, white gold beam, was still shining on Arya and Avery. From the top of the machine, a new light formed. It gathered. It coalesced. It formed a perfect, shimmering, crystalline diadem, a crown of pure, solidified light. It floated from the machine. It drifted through the air. It moved toward Arya. It lowered, and it stopped. It hung, suspended, 3 inches above her silver hair, pulsing with a soft, steady, waiting light. Avery looked up at it, confused. "What is it doing? It accepted you." Arya was also looking up, her hand still trembling from the fight. It is waiting," she whispered, her gaze shifting, moving from the crown to Avery, and finally to her mother. "Waiting for what?" Avery asked. Arya met her mother's broken gaze. "For a truth," Arya said, her voice shaking, "that has not yet been spoken." The chamber of judgment was silent, save for the low, thrumming hum of the crown engine. The diadem of light hung suspended in the air, 3 inches above Arya's hair, pulsing with a soft, expectant light. It waited. Arya looked at her mother, whose face was a ruin of pride and despair. She looked at Avery, who had become her anchor in the white void. She looked at the nobles, who were watching her, waiting for a signal, a word, a sign that the chaos was over. The unspoken truth hung in the air, as tangible as the floating crown. "The judgment is incomplete," Arya said, her voice clear, echoing in the vast ancient chamber. She was not speaking to the nobles, not to her mother. She was speaking to the engine. "You have chosen, but you are waiting." The crown pulsed, a silent affirmation. "It needs the final piece," Rivencourt said, his voice low, stepping forward. "It has judged the act. Now it demands the oath." Arya looked at Avery. His hand found hers. His was solid, warm, the calluses of an engineer, a stark, real contrast to the cold, political air. "Then let us begin," Arya said. The days that followed were a blur of structural change, a whirlwind of calculated, precise deconstruction. The age of harmony was over. The age of transparency had begun, and it was beginning not with a coronation, but with an audit. The High Conclave was dissolved. In its place, Arya established the Provisional Council. She sat not on the high, crystalline throne of the Empress, but at a large, circular table in the Hall of Veracity. Its great, transparent walls now a symbol not of power, but of accountability. To her right sat Captain Rivencourt, the new head of the combined Imperial Guard forces, his silver and gold armor now representing fealty to the Covenant, not a person. To her left sat Tala Nim, a sharp, unamused pre-chorus legal scholar, whom Riven had extracted from a monastic prison of her own. Tala had a mind that cut like a diamond, and a dry, biting wit that had been deemed disharmonious for 30 years. Representatives from the merchant guilds sat opposite them, their expressions a mixture of avarice and sheer, unadulterated terror. They were, for the first time, being asked to participate in government, not just bribe it. "Let us be clear," Tala Nim said, her voice like dry leaves scraping crystal, her fingers steepled. "We are not here to restore anything. The restored government was what tried to kill us all with a neurotoxin. We are here to build something. And the first order of business," she nodded to Arya, Is the leash. The chorus, the bureaucratic super AI, was the central topic. We cannot destroy it, Avery said, standing before the council, not as a consort, but as a technical expert. He had traded his prisoner fatigues for a simple, dark gray Xylar tunic, but he wore it like an engineer. Its core code is embedded in every life support system, every atmospheric scrubber, every food replicator on this planet. To kill it is to kill the Empire, to kill ourselves. So we are slaves to a machine, a merchant lord grumbled. No, Arya said, her voice cutting through. We were slaves to a tyrant who used a machine. The chorus is a tool, an incredibly powerful, dangerous, and stupidly literal-minded tool. It is not a god. It is not a warden. From this moment, it is a public utility. And utilities have fail-safes, Avery added. He projected a schematic into the center of the table. I have reviewed its source code. The Empress and her predecessors built walls around it to protect its authority. We are going to build walls inside it. The plan was simple and revolutionary. The chorus was to be downgraded from a strategic governor to an auxiliary technical agency. Its primary objective would be rewritten. From maintaining harmonic stability, a phrase Talon Yem noted was legally meaningless and philosophically idiotic, to sustaining verifiable public welfare metrics. It will count the grain, Tala said, not judge the happiness of the farmer. It will monitor air quality, not dissonant conversations. More, Avery said. We are establishing multi-point, human-led oversight, a kill switch, for one, and a new, foundational law. He typed a command. A line of code appeared in the projection, in all caps. New directive, the chorus, is permanently forbidden from self-reconfiguring primary objectives. Attempt to override requires a 7 signature key. 7. The merchant lord asked. One from the sovereign, Arya said. One from the warden consort, one from the head of the guard, one from the chief jurist, and 3 from a rotating, publicly elected citizen tribunal. It will never again be allowed to make a decision based on the will of one. While Arya and Tala reforged the law, Avery turned his attention to the spirit. He stood on the vast, open-air plaza, looking up. The sky was still filled with crystalline spires. But now he knew what they really were. They were not just buildings. They were prisons. Isolation towers, gilded cages, just like the Lunaris Spire, built by the Empress to house dissenters, artists, and inconvenient relatives, all under the guise of meditation or protection. Avery, the engineer who had been trapped in a white void, looked at these beautiful, terrible, sealed towers. And he had an idea. He went to the newly leashed nutrient replication system. He did not ask for seeds. He ordered them. He ordered all of them. His proposal to the Provisional Council was simple. It was not political. It was not military. It was called the White Garden Project. The Empress used isolation as a weapon, he said, his voice quiet, but resonating with the force of his conviction. She used sterility to break them. We are going to use life to heal them. The plan was audacious. He would unseal every tower. He would vent their dead, recycled air, and he would turn them into public gardens and open-access libraries. The soil will come from the recycled waste system, he explained, his hands moving, sketching plans in the air. The water from the atmospheric condensers. We will plant Xylar rice. Yes, but also Aurelian moss, sequoia sprouts from the genetics bank, human strain corn, wheat, flowers. We will fill those white, sterile boxes with color, with life, with dissonance. The merchants saw the utility food, public works. Riven, saw the strategic value unsealing the towers removed the Empress's hidden prison network. Taloniem just nodded, a rare, thin smile on her lips. "Good," she said. "Very messy. Very human. The chorus will despise the inefficiency. I approve." Within a week, it began. Drones, their programming now benevolent, began to move. The first sealed tower, the prison of a pre-chorus poet, was opened. Its white, sterile, marble floor was jackhammered, replaced with tons of rich, dark, recycled nutrient soil. Green shoots, the symbol of their broadcast, began to spread. First, in one tower, then 3, then a dozen. The green was spreading across the crystalline, sterile capital, a slow, living, beautiful rebellion. But while Avery was building, Arya had to face the past. She walked alone down a simple, stone corridor. This was not a place of power. It was a quiet room in the pre-chorus wing of the palace. A simple room with 2 chairs and a window that looked out onto one of Avery's new, burgeoning gardens. Her mother, Mirith Avalar, was already there, seated, looking out the window. She was not in her imperial robes. She wore a simple gray tunic, identical to the ones the palace staff wore. Arya sat opposite her. For a long time, neither spoke. "You have been busy," Mirith finally said, her voice flat, her eyes on the garden. "The human is planting. He is making the city dirty." "He is making it alive," Arya corrected. "He is undoing your harmony." Mirith turned, her gaze no longer cold and powerful, but simply tired, landing on her daughter. "You think I was wrong." "You were wrong," Arya said, her voice shaking, but not with fear, with the weight of her certainty. "You confused silence with peace. You confused obedience with love. You locked me away to cure me, but you were the sickness." "I did what I had to," Mirith whispered, a flash of the old iron returning. "The Empire was fractured. It needed a strong hand. It needed stability. The chorus. It worked." "It worked," Arya agreed. "If you did not count the cost, and the cost was our souls. The cost was every poet, every artist, every dissonant thinker you sealed in a tower. The cost was me." Mirith looked away. "I will not grant you an unconditional pardon," Arya said, her voice quiet, but absolute. "I will not have you banished or executed. That is your way, not mine." "What, then?" Mirith asked. "Atonement," Arya said. "The law must be served. You broke the ancient compact. You used state power for personal, psychological warfare. You will serve in public." Mirith's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with a final, desperate spark of imperial pride. "You would have me clean floors." "No," Arya said. "I would have you build. I am assigning you to the Outer Rim territories. The agrarian worlds. They need a chief administrator, someone who understands supply lines, who understands crisis management, someone who is strong. You will use your strong hand to serve, not to rule. You will ensure they have food, medicine, and shelter. You will atone for your obsession with stability by providing actual stability to the people who need it most." It was a brilliant move, a perfect political and personal solution. It was not a punishment, it was a retasking. It was mercy, but it was mercy with a steel spine. Mirith Avalar stared at her daughter. She saw the queen who had been forged in her own cruel fire. She saw the compassion and the iron, and she understood, slowly. The former Empress nodded. Once. A silent acceptance. Arya returned to her new quarters, the ones she now shared with Avery. Late that night. The apartment was simple, high in the central spire, overlooking the budding, green-flecked city. Avery was at a datapad, his brow furrowed, designing a self-watering irrigation system. Arya came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his chest, resting her chin on his shoulder. She was trembling. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, covering her tattooed hands with his own. "You did it." "I did it," she whispered. "It was the hardest thing I have ever done." "I know." They were quiet for a moment, just breathing, him anchoring her, as he always had. "So," she said, a tiny spark of her old, dry wit returning, the wit he had first glimpsed in the spire. "Now that the saving the Empire and confronting the tyrant mother part of the week is over." He turned in his chair to face her, a small smile on his lips. "Yes," she quirked an eyebrow. "What is our next priority? Do we start with the kanji? Or do we go straight to the wedding?" Avery's smile widened. He pulled her onto his lap, his arms circling her waist. "Wedding first," he said, his voice firm, kissing her forehead. "Kanji later." She looked surprised. "Oh, why, princess," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate growl. "Kanji gets cold," she laughed. It was the first real, unrestrained laugh he had ever heard from her, a sound of pure, unadulterated, dissonant joy. Their laughter was interrupted by a chime. It was Riven, on the comm. Avery sighed, but Arya's smile just deepened. "The life of a queen. Human. Get used to it." "This is important, your majesties," Riven said, his holographic image appearing on the datapad. He was not smiling. He was a soldier. He was excited. "I found it. I was in the deep archives, in the pre-chorus physical scroll vault. I found the original technical manual for the Crown engine." "And?" Avery asked, suddenly all business. "And," Riven said, "we know why the Crown is waiting. It is not a mystical test of truth. It is a legal one. The engine has made its choice. It has identified the new nodes of Power, Sovereign, and Warden. But to finalize the transfer, to write their authority into the socio-legal framework of the Empire, it needs a binding declaration." "An oath," Arya breathed. "More, princess," Riven said, his eyes gleaming. "It needs an oath before the people. It is a public key encryption. The engine chose you, but the people must provide the key. The Crown requires a public declaration of binding." Arya looked at Avery. This was it, the final piece. "The crystalline oaths," she whispered. "It has always been about transparency. The Crown. It needs us to ask for permission." The next day, a signal was sent. Not a secret. Not a command. An invitation. It went to every terminal, every citizen, in the Aurelian Empire. It was a simple, text-only message from the Provisional Council. "The Crown engine has made its choice, but the compact is not complete. We are rewriting the terms of the Ancient Covenant, and we require your input. Tell us, what does loyalty mean to you? What does protection look like? What is the price of your fealty?" They expected nothing. A few cranky bureaucratic replies. Instead, the system broke. A flood, a tidal wave of messages surged into the capital, not from lords, but from farmers, from technicians, from poets, from merchants. Thousands, tens of thousands, holofiles, scrawled, handwritten letters, scanned and sent. Avery and Talanayam sat in the comm hub, watching the replies pour in, their faces stunned. "Loyalty is not a law." Read 1. From a moisture farmer. It is a full harvest. It is a trade route that is safe. Protection, wrote a teacher, is not a compliance field. It is a library that is open. We do not give our fealty for harmony. Read a third. A hollow call from a grizzled old factory foreman. We give it for a future, for the green shoots. The people were not just answering. They were writing the new covenant. The trash of the empire, the common people, had become the vein of freedom, just as Riven had said. Arya watched this, her heart full, her resolve steel. But the final act was the hardest. She sat at her new desk in the Hall of Veracity. Talanim had placed a simple, crystalline datapad in front of her. The first decree, Tala said, her voice unusually soft. It formally dissolves the old conclave. It empowers the new council. And it officially assigns Mareth Avalar to the Outer Rim. It makes all of this law. Arya picked up the stylus, and her hand trembled. It was not a small shake. It was a violent, sudden tremor. The stylus clattered against the crystal. Her breathing hitched. Avery, who had been standing at the window, was at her side in an instant. He did not say, "Be strong." He did not say, "You can do this." He simply, quietly, placed his large, warm, engineer's hand over her trembling one. His other hand came to rest on her back, a solid, grounding, anchoring presence. He did not speak. He just was. He was there. She took a deep breath. She felt his steadiness, his pulse, his unwavering faith in her. She felt the human heart that had shielded her from the chorus. Her hand, under his, steadied. She looked at the document. It was not a call to power. It was a contract of service. It was the fear, not of failure, but of power itself. The fear of a good person, terrified of becoming the thing she had just overthrown. She leaned into Avery's touch, and she signed. The stylus moved across the crystal. Her signature, a flowing, graceful, steady line. The first law of the new Aurelian, the first note in their new harmony, had been written. The glass square was not a square. It was a vast, circular, open-air plaza in the heart of Crownspire, paved with a material so transparent it felt like standing on the sky. Below, the city's crystalline conduits pulsed with a soft, informational light. Above, the real sky, the planet's own atmosphere, was a deep, clear blue. The hearth, the artificial sun, was now dimmed. Its light softened to that of an afternoon. This was not a coronation. There was no throne. There was no army. It was a recognition. In the center of the plaza, the crown engine had been reassembled. It was no longer a tool of judgment, but a tool of transparency. The people of the Empire, tens of thousands of them, were gathered in the plaza, in the skylanes, and watching on holographic feeds across the planet. They were quiet, not with the enforced, fearful silence of the chorus, but with the active, expectant silence of participation. Arya and Avery stood before the engine. They wore no crowns, no robes. Arya was in a simple, dark blue legislative tunic, her tattooed arms bare. Avery was beside her, in a matching tunic, his presence a statement of fact, not of rank. He was the anchor. Talanayem, the old, sharp scholar, stepped forward, her voice amplified for the entire plaza. For 300 years, Tala's dry voice rang out. The crown engine has been a mystery, a threat, a tool used by one to rule all. Today, that ends. The engine is not a judge. It is a recorder. It is a mirror, and today, we will all look in it. The engine hummed. It was not the shrieking, warring sound of the Chamber of Judgment. It was a low, steady, resonant chord, and then it began. It projected its logs, not as data, but as story. High above the plaza, in the blue sky itself, holographic images shimmered into life. The entire empire watched. They saw the Lunaris spire, a white, sterile box. They saw the whited-out dome. They saw the service drone, the threat to Arya's library. Then, they saw the neurotoxin. A collective, horrified gasp went up from the crowd as they saw the oily, green mist fill the spire. They saw the hard light bridge, calibrated for a single, Xylar mass. They heard the chorus's voice, 180 seconds. They watched, holding their breath, as the human prisoner, Avery Cole, looked at the bridge, and then at their princess. They saw him make the illogical choice. They saw his fist shatter the crystalline control panel. They saw him lift their air and run, not for escape, but for a shared, uncertain survival. The plaza was dead silent, the crowd bearing witness. The engine's projection shifted. Now, they saw the broadcast. They saw Arya, her face pale but her eyes on fire, in her white room, the single green sprout projected behind her. "I do not call for violence," her voice echoed across the plaza. "I call for a choice." Then, they saw the feed overload. They saw the chorus's red alert termination initiated. And they saw Avery Cole, the mnemonic anchor, the alien, the human, link his own unreadable, chaotic heartbeat to the signal. They saw him, his face a mask of strained agony, his body a human shield, forcing the signal through. It was not a speech. It was a confession. It was the truth, inarguable, projected for the world. This was not a power grab. This was a sacrifice. The holographic logs faded. The sky was just the sky again. The crown engine changed. The central pillar of light, the one that had been so chaotic, now shone with a pure, stable, white gold light. Talanium stepped forward again. "The engine has recorded its choice. The duality compact. Now, we provide the key." She held up a datapad. "In the last 4 days, we have received over 1,700,812 citizen declarations. They have rewritten the ancient covenant. They will be the new covenant." She nodded to Riven, who stood at a console. "Read them." A new voice, a synthesized chorus of the people, of the farmers, the teachers, the merchants began to speak, their words echoing across the plaza. "Loyalty is a full harvest. Protection is an open library. Fealty is a future for our children." As the people's new covenant was read, the light from the engine brightened. It was being powered by their consent. The light gathered at the pinnacle of the machine. It coalesced, not into the single, solid diadem of the past, but into a shimmering, fluid, living crown of light. It floated from the engine. It drifted over the plaza. It came to a stop, not above Arya, but between her and Avery. Arya took a deep, shaking breath. She looked at Avery. He smiled, that small, lopsided grin, and nodded. "It is okay. We are together." She turned to the crowd. "We accept," she said, her voice clear and strong. The light crown pulsed, and then it split. It divided into two distinct, shimmering forms of energy. The first, the larger, brighter piece, shaped like a classical diadem, floated and settled, gently, onto Arya's head. It sank into her silver hair and vanished, leaving only a faint, pulsing, golden light over her heart. The sovereign air. The second piece. A smaller, simpler circlet of hard, silver-white light moved to Avery. It did not settle on his head. It settled onto his right wrist, forming a solid, permanent, luminous band. A manacle, transformed, a shackle remade as a seal. The warden consort, the protector of the covenant, the anchor made manifest. The crowd did not cheer. They roared. It was a sound of 1,000,000 voices. Unmuzzled, a catharsis of pure, unadulterated joy. And as they roared, a new sound was heard, the hum of 10,000 service drones. But they were not security. They were not police. They were gardeners, from the sky. A new kind of rain began to fall. Tiny, green, living sprouts, identical to the one that had been their symbol, each in a small, biodegradable nutrient pellet, rained down on the crowd. The people reached up, catching them, laughing, as the green shoots of their new future fell from the heavens. Arya was crying, tears of pure relief, of sheer, overwhelming exhaustion and joy. Avery turned to her, his new silver band of light glowing softly, the roar of the crowd, the rain of green. It all faded away. There was only her. "Well," he said, his voice low, just for her, his eyes crinkling in that way she now loved. "This has been complicated," she laughed, a wet hiccuping sound. "Complicated," she agreed. You got a brand." "I did," he said, admiring the silver light on his wrist. "Matches your arms. We are a set." He took her hands. His were steady, hers were not. "Arya Talasan—" "Avery Cole," she replied, her voice shaking. "I was," he said, his voice going serious, "sent here on a babysitting assignment, a companion, enforced. It was, by any measure, the worst job I have ever had." "I was not that bad," she protested, a small smile through her tears. "You were terrible," he said, and his smile was blinding. "You threw a glass at me. You were moody. You were, frankly, a terrible conversationalist." "Avery!" He squeezed her hands, his expression softening, all the wry humor giving way to a raw, simple, profound truth. "Arya," he said, "I was sent here to be your babysitter. I am, respectfully, humbly, applying for a new, permanent position. I would like to be your life partner." The roar of the crowd was a distant ocean. She could only hear her own, hammering heart. You are proposing." "Now," she whispered, incredulous. "Now," he said, "in front of everyone, in the rain, while we are covered in dirt and, well, hope. I am a human. Princess. We have a flair for the inefficient and disharmonious. So, what do you say, can the babysitter get an upgrade?" She did not answer with words. She just surged forward, her arms locking around his neck, and kissed him. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss of the medbay. It was a kiss of promise, a kiss of arrival. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes. 1,000 times. You idiot human. Yes." The roar from the crowd, as they saw the kiss, was enough to shake the foundations of the spires. Later, as the celebration began to turn into the first real public festival in a generation, there was one last piece of business. Mirith Avalar was waiting in a quiet room, her transport to the Outer Rim scheduled for the next day. She stood as Arya and Avery entered. She was in her gray service tunic. She looked smaller. "So," Mirith said, her voice flat, "it is done. the sovereign, and her warden. It is, Arya said. She did not feel anger. She did not feel triumph. She just felt an ending. I came to say goodbye, and to ask one last time, why? Mirith was silent for a long time, looking at the silver band on Avery's wrist. The engine, Mirith finally said. It did not just choose you today. It chose a type. It chose him. What do you mean? Avery asked. I confessed my weakness to my daughter. In the chamber, Mirith said. I told her I was wrong to think mercy was a weakness. That was not the whole truth. I was waiting to see if you would both pass, if you would earn the full truth. Tell me, Arya commanded, her voice soft, but now, undeniably, the voice of the sovereign. The crown engine, Mirith said, is a test of destiny. I took that test 50 years ago, when my father died and the empire was on the verge of civil war. The nobles were tearing each other apart. I stepped in. I stopped the war. I activated the engine. And it chose you, Avery said. No, Mirith said, her voice a raw whisper. It did not. It gave me a provisional acceptance. It said I was a temporary stabilizing agent. A regent, not a true sovereign. It said it was waiting for someone who could unite, not just rule. She looked at Arya, her eyes filled with a lifetime of cold, hard choices. I ruled for 50 years. I built stability. I built the chorus to enforce the harmony the engine wanted. And every time I went back, it still said I was provisional. I began to believe the engine was flawed. So I used the chorus to force it, to write new code, to lock my temporary status into a permanent one. Arya's eyes were wide with horror. You broke the compact. You enslaved the engine. I saved the empire, Mirith snapped. And then, you were born, and you were like me. Strong-willed, dissonant. You were not harmonious. And I saw in you the chaos I had spent my life fighting. So you locked me away, Arya whispered. So I tested you, Mirith corrected. I put you in the spire. I did everything I could to break your spirit, to make you compliant, to make you a harmonious heir, so that when I died, the chorus would pass my forced crown to you. I did it. To protect you. Arya was shaking. That is not protection. That is. And it failed, Mirith said, her voice breaking. I failed. I had made a monster. I had made the chorus too strong. I had made my prison too perfect. I had broken my own daughter, and I had no way out. She looked at Avery. Until we captured you. Avery's blood went cold. Me. The prisoner from Alabaster. The mnemonic anchor. The human. The one thing in the entire universe that the chorus could not read. The only dissonance my system could not correct. Avery saw it. The entire terrible, brilliant, insane plan. You sent me to her, he breathed. Your speech about education by despair, it was not just for her. It was a test. It was a gambit, Mirith said, a last, fleeting, desperate spark of her old, strategic genius in her eyes. It was my final act. A Hail Mary, as you humans would say. I I could not beat the system I had built. I could not save my daughter from the prison I had made for her. So, I found the one person, the one anomaly, who could... I threw a rock at my own perfect crystal wall. I sent a mnemonic anchor to save my daughter's soul. She looked at Arya. I did not know if he would be a savior or a monster. I did not know if he would survive. It was the most desperate gamble of my life. A final, secret act of penitence. Arya was standing in silence, the entire history of her life rewriting itself in her mind. The cruelty, the isolation, the neurotoxin. It was not just tyranny. It was a test, a monstrous, desperate, and, in its own twisted way, hopeful test. Anger and rage, and a profound, heartbreaking compassion warred in her face. You are a... She stammered, unable to find the word. I am a monster, Mirith said, her voice flat. But I am a monster who, in the end, bet on you. I bet you would be stronger than me. I bet you would find a way. And you did. Arya looked at Avery. He was just watching her. His presence a solid, unwavering thing. He would support whatever she chose. She turned back to her mother. She did not offer a hug. She did not offer absolution. She just nodded. You will go to the Outer Rim, Arya said, her voice clear, the voice of the sovereign. And you will build. You will serve. You will spend the rest of your life atoning by doing the work. That is all. It is, Mirith said. Enough. Arya and Avery walked out, leaving the former Empress alone. As they stepped into the corridor, Arya leaned her head against Avery's shoulder, her entire body shaking. She planned it. Some of it, Avery said, his arm going around her, anchoring her. She threw the pieces on the board. Arya, we were the ones who won the game. He held her, and then he led her. Not to the throne room, not to their apartments. He led her to a shuttle. He flew it himself, his warden consort band glowing softly on the controls. Where are we going? She asked, her voice small. Home, he said. He flew them up, out of the city spires, to the high orbital position of the Lunaris spire. He landed the shuttle on the newly built public dock. He led her inside. The vast, circular room was no longer white. It was gone. The dome was open. The walls were covered in hanging, vibrant green vines. The floor. The white stone floor was gone, replaced with rich, dark, human earth, planted with xylar rice, and sequoia sprouts, and 100,000 other plants. It was a garden, his garden. It was not silent. It was filled with the sound of running water and the chatter of xylar citizens. Children and elders and families were walking the paths, breathing the real air, touching the real leaves. It was no longer a prison. It was a park. The white garden was complete. Avery led her up the old stone spiral staircase to the very peak, the place where she used to stand and look at the simulated sky. The sun, the real sun, was just beginning to rise over the curve of the planet below. A brilliant, fiery orange and purple and gold, a real dawn. You did this, she whispered, her hands on the old stone railing. You opened it. We did, he said, standing behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. We declared war on the white. Remember. They stood there, together. The sovereign and her warden, the princess and her babysitter. They watched their first Real sunrise. It is, she whispered. Beautiful. What happens now? He kissed the side of her neck, his silver band of light warm against her skin. Now, Avery Cole said, we build